When you're this close to episode 200, folks, you got to bring back the guests that helped you get there. And for this one, you see him, you see the picture, you will recognize the voice. Shout out to Randy, because I know he's a favorite of yours. From Rogers Sportsnet, we have Andy McNamara. I was worried about doing this in the moment, but I'm going to say it right now. Because we're both AEW marks, but instead of saying welcome back, I'm going to say scissor me, Andy. Let's go.
I'm with you. Griff, you got to give the people what they want, to use another AEW term. Yes. Give the people what they want, and they want Griff, and they want McNamara, and they want it on the show, brother, as we get close to 200. Scissor. I love it. What a time, for a quick wrestling note, with All Elite Wrestling, that Billy Gunn in the year 2022 has another controversial shirt that I'm sure is getting kids suspended from school. Phenomenal.
Oh, I am 100% sure of it as well. And folks, before we get into today, I have to do a quick shout out, because if you live in Ohio, on January 1st, sports gambling becomes legal. Register at the link in the bio to help Andy out for Betfred. Because why? Where else would you want to do your sports betting than Betfred?
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And, all your great listeners and everybody, love being on with you guys. And yeah, very simple to do. And here's the cool thing. Betfred Sportsbook, guys, this isn't like the ones you hear. It's like, oh, put this and you get a $10 bonus. And it's like, okay. No. Betfred Sportsbook, they give, you qualify for weekly cool prizes. One of the prize this week is, if you register, tickets to the Browns-Bengals game in Cincinnati, for example. So that's just one thing. They got merch to give away. They have the bonuses, the pre-registered exclusive bonuses when you sign up. So you just go betfredsports.com/Ohio/Andy McNamara. Get those in there. And yeah, man, let's have some fun.
Let's have some fun. I love to hear it. I said to give Betfred a quick shout out.
Thanks, brother.
Starting, first of all, with this year, obviously fantasy football is coming near an end. Is there any players out there that have impressed you? But I don't want you to give, those usual suspects. It's more or less the players that you didn't expect to have good years or that weren't on your radar at all that impressed you.
I would say, if we're looking at it, somebody and I guess it depends where you valued him based on the team, but Dameon Pierce, I know he had a lot of run going up for some, and he was really a mystery, though, because it was like, all right, the Texans are awful. Where do we look at it? He stands out. Kenneth Walker also stands out, because that whole Seattle situation was weird, right? It was okay, Drew Lock and Geno Smith, and it's just going to be a disaster and nothing's going to happen. Well, Kenneth Walker, he's banged up a bit now, but boy, when that dude finally got his time in week 5 and beyond, he did not look back. We're going to be really thinking about Kenneth Walker as a first-round fantasy pick next year, for real. So that's someone who really stands out to me as far as a value guy that probably didn't have a whole lot of fantasy hype coming into the year, and he's just been nothing but exceptional.
Yeah, and then one from my end that I want to give, and it's a bit homerish, but at the same time, too, he has earned it, is Ramondre Stevenson as well. He was going in most in the 6th or 7th round. Next year, he's probably, I'm not saying he's going to be a first rounder, but he'll definitely be in that 2nd, 3rd round category, maybe even first in some. But if I have to go for impressed as well, I'm going to go Josh Jacobs, just because of how he's been playing lately. And no matter where he is next year, he's easily going to be probably in a lot of people's fantasies top 5. If I had the draft for next year already, I'd put your boy Nick Chubb in the number 1 spot.
Ooh, boy. Yeah, he'd be right there. He'd be right there, right? And it's so interesting when you have the fantasy sort of turnover when it comes to those, because you get a couple years in a row of usually the same guy. It wasn't that long ago we were talking about Todd Gurley and Melvin Gordon, right? Yeah. Not that long. Then it was Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
And then Jonathan Taylor. And it's okay, I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be in a tremendous bounce back spot next year.
Yes.
I think that's going to be on the table. Yeah, Nick Chubb. Yeah, if they keep that offensive line, they're going to need some upgrades, because Jack Conklin probably gone the right tackle. The Browns are right now on their 4th string center, Nick Froholt, or Nate or something. Froholt, he's from Finland or somewhere.
He's from, I believe,
Norway?
It is Denmark or Iceland. He was a Patriots draft pick. Fun fact.
Yes. Okay.
I know all about Froholt. I know exactly all about him.
Guy's a gamer. I'll tell you. Look, that dude took on Vita Vea and stood his ground. Yep. So, I think he's done a great job. But yeah, Nick Chubb, he's right there. I think it'll be very interesting, too, when we look ahead to next year. Where does Tua go
With the quarterback rankings, I think Hurts is going to be a guy that a lot of people buy high on, but I would say proceed with caution just because we don't know what Philly's going to be next year.
Mhm.
But I think you have before Tua, I would still say Allen, Mahomes, and then I think he goes in that, that Burrow, Herbert, like Kyler Murray, even Kirk Cousins to a degree. Another one too is where does Jamal Williams fit in next year too in fantasy? Guys like him, Tony Pollard, guys who can get you double digits as those late round picks. Even hell, a guy like Breece Hall this year who really came on and unfortunately had the ACL tear in October. Excuse me, it's been a while since you and I spoke. That's why I'm a little off. But there's a lot of these guys next year for when it comes to quarterbacks and running backs that are going to go in places. But my big question for next year too is, how does the receiver market look for fantasy football, and even the tight end market? Because the tight end market this year, unless you have like Kelsey or Kittle, it's been a real disappointment this year.
It's really gross. And just one more point on the quarterbacks. Geno Smith's getting overdrafted. Like, nice story. I like the journey, fun, but man, that just has regression splattered all over it, doesn't it? Like, come on.
It's the same thing. I'm not like with Hurts. I'm not saying the same thing with Philly. I just think a lot of people are gonna go in on those Philly guys, thinking that hey, they can run it back. They're gonna be no problem. But I completely agree with you on there. I also think too that there's certain guys that that you sell. Like, just wait for the guys you sell low on. Like who's a prime example? With the tight end market, the only one that comes to mind for when it came to consistency a bit was Pat Freiermuth's the guy that's kind of in that, those like later rounds. Like, that's the one thing I focused on with you a lot when you were on here in August, was those late round guys. And that switches into the disappointments, because there's a lot of fantasy disappointments. And I have a bit of a hot take for you on one.
Okay.
Derrick Henry.
Okay.
He hasn't been he's had his moments, but I've been seeing a lot of people say he's only good in divisional games, and that he hasn't really had those, those consistent monster games like you've seen from Josh Jacobs. Saquon Barkley's another guy I would say is back to form. Zeke Elliott in a way too. So that's a take for me. And the other one, it's personal because I know you heard me vouch for him a lot, is Allen Robinson, but I don't blame Robinson for it at all.
Well, and he's injured, and now, Baker might be playing tonight. It's a disaster. This year, boy, Super Bowl hangover to the next level when it comes to the Rams. But on the tight end, so look at this. So Pat Freiermuth, right now, depending on your format, but PPR, fourth best fantasy tight end, okay? Yeah. Now, on the surface, wow, you must be doing amazing. Incorrect. Overall in fantasy. For tight ends, yes. Pat Freiermuth this year, I'm looking here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 single-digit fantasy point games. 6, including 1-0. He has not eclipsed 16 fantasy points, and he's the fourth best guy. That, people, is why it is super thin at tight end. Dallas Goedert hasn't played since week 10, and he is still the sixth best tight end. It's terrible. I think for next year, if you're not in that Travis Kelce standpoint, Andrews is still in that floater. TJ Hawkinson, I loved him in Detroit. I love him more in Minnesota. Boy, was that a great move by the Vikings. And TJ Hawkinson would be, if I'm doing my rankings right now, everything as is, I'd put TJ Hawkinson number 2 under Kelce next year.
I really like that take. I really do. Another guy I like for tight ends, he's like a sell low, buy high kind of guy, is potentially Dalton Schultz as well. I know he doesn't get a whole lot of touchdowns, but he does get a whole lot of touches of the football. So just another guy to keep in mind as well. Noah Fant as well, a guy who, when Denver made that trade with Seattle, I said Denver should not have given up Fant that easily because they're going to need him. And look, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I guess I was kind of right on that one.
Well, they need a lot. And here's another riser for next year. And when you look at the end of year rankings, he's not going to jump out to you. But the savvy fantasy player, Griff, looks at Cole Kmet and Justin Fields and the chemistry those two guys have when Fields and Kmet have played starting from week 9. The first 2 weeks, 4 total touchdowns, 2 in each game, 22 or more fantasy points. Then Fields had the shoulder out of the lineup, back to single digits. Cole Kmet done nothing. Last week, 6 catches, 72 yards, back to double digit in the teens fantasy points. Cole Kmet, based on how bad tight ends do, Cole Kmet, I think, is a, if healthy with Fields, that dude's a locked-in top 4 for me, 4 or 5.
There's nothing wrong with that take like that. I like that a lot. And also, too, if you grab him, you can easily name your fantasy team. How I met your mother. So it's just little things like that.
I might have to do that.
I've seen it. I've seen it before a couple of times.
I like it.
Another tight end. I know you actually got me on the whole thing with rookies in certain tight end situations, but I'm going to put you on one right now because if he goes into the right situation, I think he can get there quickly and be a good player for fantasy. But that's Michael Mayer. He's the current tight end at Notre Dame, just declared for the draft. So that's a name to keep out for 2023 when it comes to fantasy football. If you're wondering, why are we doing this? Andy tweeted out the gif of Nick Kroll earlier today that says it all, that fantasy football is a religion. I do fantasy hockey too. I do sports gambling, which I'm down horribly right now. But
you'll bounce back. You're good.
Due for a bounce back. Exactly. Everyone's due for a bounce back. But that's the thing. You always have to pay attention to fantasy football. It's that app. You tinker with your roster 7 days a week. I don't make rules.
I make no matter what league, I make a waiver wire move at least one every week. Even if it's for depth or stash or just guys, I try to get, you try to get better at the bottom just in case, add some depth here or there. You have to. Paying attention is half the battle. And it's not as hard for fantasy baseball, I find especially. Like Griff, I've won fantasy baseball championships or at least got deep in the playoffs simply a large part by paying attention because people forget over the summer or they go on vacation. You pay attention. And it helped. David Njoku, when healthy, that's another guy, of course, you keep an eye on for fantasy next year and for the rest of this year, too.
Exactly. And then just switching gears quickly to our fantasy league that we're in, I'm just going to say this right now. Andy, you have the first playoff spot, and then Ramey is in second. I'm in third, and then Danny is in fourth. So we're all battling it out because the razor thinness between third and sixth is one game. I'm 8-5. Then you have 3 teams at 7-6, and then Ramey is sitting at 9-4. So we'll have to see what happens this week, but it's shaping up to be a very good road to the Fantasy Football Championships for the first ever YWC Football Talk Fantasy Football League. Switching gears quickly here for this weekend in particular. Look, since it's about best bets and everything like that, we're going to go over some best bets. But before we do that, folks, a quick word on Ring of Honor. Andy, take it away.
Yes, final battle this Saturday. Absolutely. What a throw. Professional broadcaster, Griff, brother. Love it. This is a stat card, and the reason we're bringing it up is because old Uncle Andy here's got a free pay-per-view if you are outside the United States. So if you're in Canada listening and watching this show, you can win the free pay-per-view from our friends at Fight TV, and it's very easy to do. All you got to do is you go to my Twitter at AndyMC81 or Instagram at AndyMCSports, and you just look for you'll see a big old Samoa Joe picture on there. It's a contest or giveaway or something at the top. All you got to do is follow me, follow at Fight TV, and reply with the match that you're looking forward to most on this loaded final battle Ring of Honor pay-per-view. You got Chris Jericho, the Ocho, facing Claudio in Ring of that right there is good enough. But then you got Samoa Joe facing Juice Robinson. You got FTRs in the house. You have Daniel Garcia versus Wheeler Yuta for the Pure Championship. Like, this is going to be an absolutely sensational deal. At 4 p.m. on a Saturday, too. You get a little, you don't have to stay up late till you don't have to have the midnight one. So you chill out, no football, and enjoy the Ring of Honor pay-per-view. But to enter to win it for free, and I have the link, too. Even if you don't win, you can click on it.
Yep.
And just buy it right there. But you just go, again, at AndyMC81 on Twitter, at AndyMCSports. Look at the instructions. Follow me. Follow Fight TV. Boom. Off we go. And hopefully one of the listeners win.
Let's hope so. This weekend is loaded for sports, folks. You have NBA, you have NHL, you have college on, you have the Army-Navy game, you have Ring of Honor, you have UFC, and you got the World Cup. I can't name a better time of the year. But on to our best bets for Week 14. I'm going to come out of the gate with one. I don't know how he's going to feel about it. But I love your Cleveland Browns at plus 5.5 on the road. I love it. I just look at that number and I'm like, I see Cincinnati coming off of a tough game against the Chiefs. It was a hard-fought battle, just scraped by with the win. And you have a Browns team that some people think, hey, they look a little vulnerable. They look a little rusty. I think this is a game where the Browns can really surprise a lot of people.
Man, I hope you are right. Believe me, I am putting all that energy you have out there. I want that to be correct. I think it makes there's certainly a path to it. Now, here's some interesting numbers and facts for you guys to go along with backing that. Is Joe Burrow's never defeated the Cleveland Browns. Kevin Stefanski and this Browns regime 4-0 versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow has said that Myles Garrett's in his head. They said, well, why are the Browns? He said, no other team has Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett lives rent-free in Joe Burrow's head, so he has to have a big game quick, especially near the beginning of the ball game. Last time when they played on Halloween, Bengals were rolling, Browns were floundering, and Myles Garrett with a tip pass, and it got intercepted right away. Get into Burrow's head. The offensive line for the Bengals has improved. They're using the running game more. Deshaun Watson, we don't know what to expect performance-wise because last week, I'll tell you, that was pretty ugly. And Nick Chubb, though, every game of his career, he's played the Bengals, he's gone for over 100 yards. So I hope the Browns strategically stick with what works. Don't put too much on Watson and just hopefully he does a little better. Because, Griff, that makes things a lot more interesting if the Browns do win because they're 6-7. Then if the Steelers can beat a Lamar Jackson-less Ravens team, that AFC North starts getting a lot more crowded.
I will say this about that game. I like the under of 36.5 for the Ravens and the Steelers game, but I do agree with you on all your takes there about your game. I think we could expect a big Nick Chubb day. Also, fun fact about a player this week, if you are, let's say you're snake bitten by the bye, because let's be honest, even though it's the last weekend of buys, there's a lot of teams on buys. You want someone that's going to get a touchdown. You heard it here first. Go get Boston Scott. Available in... He is only owned in 1% of Yahoo fantasy leagues. Why do I say that? Because the Philadelphia Eagles play the New York Giants, and every time those two teams meet, Boston Scott is good for a touchdown. Go look at his numbers. I'm not exaggerating this. Every time that Boston Scott is on the field against the Giants, he finds the end zone. I'm not making this up. And also, too, it's just something I just thought of now. So I just did a quick little waiver wire pickup in one of our other in one of the other leagues that I'm in. And I'm quickly going to log on to my FanDuel apps because obviously Betfred's not available in Canada yet. And I want to get you guys the number for what it would cost for him for any time.
I was just going to ask if you had the anytime touchdown on Boston Scott.
I don't yet. No, not FanDuel doesn't have it yet. But the spread, that's another spread that I like, though. I like the Giants at +7. Why? Because I've learned a secret when it comes to betting. Whenever you have an NFL game of a divisional favorite that's a huge favorite, fade them. I like both New York teams to cover their spreads. I don't know if I like them both to win, but I like the Jets and Giants both to cover their big spreads against the Bills and the Eagles this weekend. It
could be the Jets and the Giants both, I think, are starting to come back down to earth from that start in the record. But that doesn't mean they're going to be an easy out. They're both very well coached. The teams both believe. I'm with you. I don't think they'll win, but it would not surprise me if they cover that game. I think, too, your Patriots-Cardinals Monday night, if I'm looking at that, you know what? James Conner's a nice play. He's been coming on running back for the Cardinals. But the 43.5 in Arizona, I don't know, man. With how inconsistent Kyler's been, I'm kind of feeling the under on that. I kind of feel like a suffocation of the Patriots coming. They got the pillow in hand and to go after the Cardinals on that. I think they just – this Cardinals team is not good. They're just not. They were expected to be good, and they're not. So I'm feeling kind of the under there. And, yeah, the road favorite Patriots, I kind of dig it.
I've always liked them to win because I've said this for weeks, but I love for them to lose in Vegas just because it's a revenge game. And plus, too, they're going to be spending the week out in Arizona. After the game, they're not going home. They're going to spend the week out there. And usually when you have that happen, usually lose the next one. It happened earlier this year when San Francisco went out to play they played Carolina, and then they played Atlanta the next week, and then they lost in Atlanta. And that's another under that I like. I like San Francisco, Tampa, under 37.5. I'll give you 3 reasons why. I don't expect Brock Purdy to have a good day. And all right, that's the thing with Brock Purdy. I'm not saying I'm not expecting him to have a good day in the sense of, turnovers and stuff like that. I just don't see him getting a lot done. And as for the GOAT, look, I love the guy. You can't fade that San Francisco defense. It's that weak Tampa offensive line. It can be one of those games where it can be a very long day for Tom. So if I'm looking at 2 plays for that game, I love San Francisco to cover the 3.5, and I love the under of 37.5. I can easily see like a 13-6 kind of football game. And especially too considering Brady had the game of his life on Monday night, one of many, to say the least.
To make the comeback, yeah. And I would check whatever the prop play is on the passing yards for Brock Purdy and pretty much take the under. Because here's the thing. Unlike if you go to any backup quarterback, then you could say that. But what we know about the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, they can get with their proper starting quarterback, have a guy throw for under 100 yards or just barely that, or throw it 8 times. Like Jimmy Garoppolo, they have that formula built in on how to succeed and thrive with not having to rely on a lot of passes and sometimes as few as, yes, single digits. So that's another reason why I like the under on that as well. And yeah, whatever that Brock Purdy passing yard line is, I think we're going to see a heavy dose of Deebo Samuel, creative. Remember too, backfield receiver last year. He was everything. Now you have Christian McCaffrey. You can dink and dunk a little bit to Kittle and Ayuk. I think that's the way that game goes.
2 props here that I see that I love is Christian McCaffrey total rushing plus receiving yards is at over 96.5 right now.
Okay.
And the other one for Brock Purdy, they don't have his total yards, but here's the one that I love. Brock Purdy under 29.5 pass attempts. That's what minus 115 at the score bet.
Oh, I like that. I would take that right now.
Another one I wanted to ask you about is, do we buy the Lions as a 2-point favorite against the Vikings, or is everyone kind of – because here's how I look at it. The Lions last week go out there and just wipe the floor with the Jags. So everyone's kind of like, and then how the Vikings had 2 close games with the Patriots and the Jets, and they're still finding their feet from when they got their butts kicked by the Cowboys. I think that's a very trap spread where everyone's going to think, Detroit's going to come in, they're going to take care of business, but then I think that's a game where the Lions come back to earth.
That's a pretty ballsy line by Vegas to have the Lions as a favorite over a 10-2 team. Right? Now they might be not the realest 10-2 team with the Vikings, but the Lions a favorite. Woof. Interdivision game, like that's a bit spicy. Yeah, I would be definitely like I'd be looking what's the money line for the Vikings to win. I'd be looking at that, and then maybe even it's probably minus 110 or something unexciting to cover the 2. But
I have 2 actually. The one I was going to say to you as well. Boston Scott is plus 500 for a touchdown.
Let's go. I'm in on that, man. You sold me. I'm doing Boston Scott plus 500 anytime touchdown. Let's go.
The Vikings are plus 110. That's another thing I'll say. I love that over. If I have to look at 2 overs for the week, I love them over 51.5 in that game. And give me the Sunday night over of 52.5 with the Chargers and the Dolphins.
Yeah, that could. And you know what? Mike Williams is practicing. Good news for Chargers and for fantasy teams too. If he plays, gives them a little punch. And the Dolphins, like this is crunch time. This is another certainly not unbeatable opponent, but quality opponent. So Dolphins have to go on the road and take care of business because that AFC East, it's not getting any looser. Like that. That's going to be a race to the finish. Exactly.
That's the way I look at it. And also, too, that game is going to have the hottest takes coming out of it if either quarterback screws it up for their team, where it's going to be, they should have gone Herbert over Burrow, or they were like Herbert over Tua, or Tua should have gone before Herbert.
Yeah.
It's going to be one of those like where it's just crazy. And for everyone right now out there, Justin Herbert is a good quarterback. He's the top 10 quarterback in the league. So I don't like it when people say like, one player is, one player isn't. So I'm just like,
Herbert's really good. He's going to be really good. He's Josh Allen light right now. He's got the arm, he's got the speed, he's got the size. He just hasn't put it all together. Certainly not anywhere near his fault. The injuries in LA and the questionable coaching have just been rampant. So I think Justin Herbert eventually is going to be just fine. Hopefully get some more help. I think if you're the Chargers, I'm not saying you get rid of Keenan Allen, but you got to bring in a vibe. You cannot count on this guy. You just can't anymore.
But you know who I can count on? And Brampton and Ontario's own Josh Palmer has looked really good for them this year.
Absolutely. Look, he's for being able to get him likely off of waivers.
Yes.
I have a couple of my leagues either on the bench and play him from time to time. The guy's giving you decent number. He's not blowing the roof on. He had the one great game against Kansas City where he got almost 27 fantasy points, 106 yards, at another 100-plus yard game in Atlanta. So he's giving you a couple stud performances, but he's kept you in those low double-digit fantasy points where if you're looking for somebody who, I need to put somebody in a flex. To me, Griff, if you get double-digit fantasy points out of a waiver wire pickup, it's a success. You count that as a success because you probably weren't going to get that from anybody else.
You 100% count as a success. You look at one of those things where it's just like, hey, you hit on it. Before we go, I have a couple questions for you about spreads for this weekend. Which one do you trust more to cover? Dallas at minus 17 or the Kansas City Chiefs at minus 9.5 against the Broncos?
Oh boy. That 17 is just so high.
That's college numbers. That's college.
It's college numbers. You're right. But part of me is thinking like, well, it makes sense. I would say Chiefs are more likely to cover than that line. But man, having just seen the Texans, dude, these guys are bad. They're going back to Davis Mills. They are really bad. They have no fight in them. Oh, you know what? I might be talking myself into the Cowboys here. Yeah. 17. That's so high. I'll say the Chiefs. I'll say the Chiefs, but I won't be surprised. Texans, like the worst.
Here's my thing too with the Chiefs. I think you get Mahomes going into Denver, a little pissed off, and I also think too people might take Denver because of what they did last week to the Ravens. But then this week it's like no. You played Tyler Huntley. You're playing Patrick Mahomes now. Meanwhile, with Dallas, I would take that in a teaser, kind of like with the Bills spread. I would take the Bills at the Bills are -10 right now. I take the Bills at -3, for example, to cover that spread. If the Bills go out there and do it, sure, all the power to them. I'm just saying I don't trust the Bills at -10, considering too last time, hey, the Jets did beat them.
Yeah, for sure. And division game, right? Like the division games, you got to be real careful of those double digits because we see quite often weird stuff and these teams play each other really close.
100%. That's the thing. Divisional games is just too iffy. That's why anything too, like with Dallas, I would take them at -10, for example. I can trust them to win by that. Because I feel like this game, it's either going to be weirdly close and Dallas is a bad day, or we see what we saw on Sunday night against the Colts. Before we get you out of here tonight, do we trust the Raiders at -6.5?
Oh, how many times have we been burned by the Raiders? You know what? I don't at 6.5. I don't. Even with all the injuries, the Rams are in horrible shape. I honestly, outside of, I think Cam Akers actually could be a nice play today, fantasy wise. But outside of that, I don't want anything to do with the Rams. But the Raiders just shoot themselves in the foot all the time. Like, I'm not scared of the Raiders. That 6.5 is a bit too much, I think. I would take the Rams, whether it's Baker Mayfield or somebody. Baker Mayfield on 2 days joining the team, or whoever the heck they get in there. I don't see the Raiders running away with that. They haven't earned that type of line.
I think it's one of those things, too, where everyone kind of viewed last week, too. That was a Vegas steal last week, and it was -4.5 for the Seahawks, and the Rams lost by 4. But with this game right here, the Raiders and Derek Carr has not shown me enough to get that 6.5. I do like Devontae Adams to score tonight, don't get me wrong, but that's why I did a parlay tonight. As you'll see it if you watch my videos, which I was posting as I was getting you on here. I took the Raiders at -1.5 with an Adams touchdown at +115 on FanDuel, because that's basically me saying, because the odds for if I took Raiders money line, it was like -300, which I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So I took the -1.5, basically saying I think they're going to win by 2, and I trust Adams to get into the end zone just because of all the injuries. But ultimately, to this game, I look at 41.5. I think it's just this is another Thursday night snooze fest, because that's one thing that's done disappointing on. But then next week we get Brock Purdy and Geno Smith in what could be a division-winning game.
Right, Brock Purdy and Geno Smith. Who had that on their bingo cards at the start of the season?
Yes, and I know Baker's your guy, but I know the thing I was going to say with the 49ers not getting him, though, basically shows that, hey, that pretty much shows how they trust their defense, because the 2022 49ers remind me a lot of the 2015 Broncos, where their defense can go out there and get it done, and the offense just has to be competent. Yeah,
and Brock Purdy and how that offense is structured, like we talked about, is built to do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to have Brock Purdy. You don't have to rely on Brock Purdy throwing the ball 50 times and throwing it downfield, assuming that the defense does carry its end and the running game and those short extended run plays, those short passes work. Now, if you get down by a couple scores, you're done, because Brock Purdy's not bringing you back. That's the only trouble when you go with that type of style or offense where you don't want to throw the ball. You're probably not coming back if you get down by 2 scores.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing where if their defense has a bad day, it's not. That's why, like this Sunday, for example, I love 49ers -3.5, because I trust that defense to make Tom Brady frustrated, because when you frustrate him in the pocket, you're good. And I also trust the 49ers to not play scared football like what we saw with the Saints on Monday night, where they basically were playing, very conservative play calling. No, I trust Kyle Shanahan to be better than that. And also I don't know if you can bet it. If there's an over for sacks, take it for Nick Bosa. He's gonna feast.
What a stud. He's just got to stay healthy, man. He stays healthy. That guy's hard to stop.
That's it. That you nailed it on the head. Folks, next week's going to be episode 200. Turn it next week when we get there. It's a milestone. I got 2 big guests lined up for it. You're not going to want to miss it. You haven't seen these 2 together in a very long time, so it's going to be a lot of fun. And their teams are rivals. That's all I'm going to say. And their teams happen to play each other next week. That's all I'm going to say for that. Andy, it's been a blast as always. We'll have to do this again sooner than later. And I get to rant to you about I didn't get to go on a full rant of how all 3 fantasy guys all 2 of them are hurt, and one of them's been kind of meh, and that's David Montgomery, even though he's kind of turning on around a little bit lately. But episode number 198 is in the books. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. Go out there and enjoy week 14, because, folks, before you know it, this is all just going to be us brainstorming ideas for next football season.
Yeah, I know.
It's a thought we don't want to cross, but you got to start thinking about it in your head that we only have this much football left. So even if it is a crappy Thursday nighter, enjoy the game.